Welcome to the Women's Motorsports Network podcast, the show that puts the spotlight on the incredible women who fuel the world of motorsports. From drivers to crew members, engineers to fans, and everyone in between, we're here to celebrate the trailblazers, dreamers, and doers shaping the sport we love. Each episode, we share inspiring stories of females of all ages from every corner of the motorsports universe, past, present, and future. It's a journey through the seasons of life filled with heartfelt moments, laughter, and a whole lot of horsepower. So whether you're a lifelong fan, a racer yourself, or simply curious about the extraordinary women behind the wheel, settle in, relax, and enjoy a fun and uplifting ride with us. This is the Women's Motorsports Network podcast, connecting and celebrating women in motorsports, one story at a time. Let's hit the track. Hello, everyone. This is Melinda Russell with the Women's Motorsports Network podcast. And my guest today is Zandara Kennedy. Zandara, I'm so happy that we could get together today. So welcome to the show. Would you first start by telling my listeners a little bit about yourself so we can get to know you better?
Sure. My name is Zandara Kennedy. My background is actually as a stunt performer, which is how I got into driving. For the last 2 years, I was competing in Formula Drift's Pro Spec category. This year, I'm going to be continuing a little bit more work in other series, as well as continuing some work that I started in Formula Drift with something called the Women of FD Tour. My goal basically being to connect women with opportunities in motorsport that aren't necessarily behind the wheel. I think that there's a lot of incredible women in that space already, but they don't get highlighted. And so women don't see that as a potential career path. So that's something I'm passionate about as well.
Yeah, that's so true. You know, that's why I do this, because I want, especially younger girls, they all want to be the next cup driver, the next World of Outlaw driver. And I love it. And I encourage them, and that's great. But we know how difficult that is. And so I try to encourage them. What else do you like to do? Do you like photography? Do you like, accounting? What else do you like to do? And because every race team needs those people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other jobs that we don't probably even know about or don't think about that they could do. And so I love that, what you just said about encouraging women. So go ahead.
Oh, thank you for saying that. So with my background in stunts, it was kind of the same thing. Like a race car driver and stunt performer are not that different in that they're the kind of job that is really all consuming, and the price you have to pay is quite high. You look at women or people, but more women than men, I would say, at the high level, they've had to make a lot of personal sacrifices in terms of having a family or things outside of that realm. And for some people, that isn't it. That's not fulfilling in the same way, and they want to have work-life balance, and they just want to be around this thing that they love. So I think it's really important to show that you don't have to necessarily be someone who makes those kinds of sacrifices to still be involved in the space, have a fulfilling interaction with the community, be an essential part of it in some way, but have a little bit more balance.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So let's go back to when you first got introduced to motorsports. Tell me about, how did that happen?
So my story is all wrong and all backwards. I grew up doing trampoline and circus. I do not come from a mechanical family or a car family whatsoever. I thought I would be a performer in Cirque du Soleil, but some family circumstances moved me from one side of Canada to the other when I was about 13. And I lost connection with where I was training for circus. I actually had a quite serious injury and ended up moving to Vancouver to go to school, and met somebody that knew a stuntman. And I was like, that's a job you can do? Like, how does that work? And I was about 17, 18 at the time. And I just started researching it and was like, this is the job I want to do. And I basically just put my head down and dedicated everything I could to building a career in film. So because I didn't know anybody, I'd never met anyone aside from this one stuntman. It's harder to get jobs in film when you aren't connected with someone, right? There's an amount of, you could say nepotism, but it's a small community, and people go through their own communities to hire. With stunts specifically, there's a lot on the line, right? So there's a safety aspect, there's just the amount of money the production is paying to get each shot, it takes a lot of time. So the way that I chose to go about it was to start researching the top stunt women at the time. There's a really incredible stunt woman named Melissa Stubbs, who is really one of the, not the first, but one of the like really incredible forerunners of stunts in Canada. And now she lives in the US. But I basically would look at her resume and use it as a checklist. Oh, Melissa took this course. Melissa has this skill, and I just tried to get as many skills as possible to be qualified so that when I did get opportunities, I'd be able to exceed expectations. That's always kind of been my philosophy: under promise, over deliver. So that led me to my first stunt driving class that I took at Willow Springs in just outside of Los Angeles, probably 20 years ago. They're still using the same Crown Victorias now that they were then, and they're even older. They're 1970s, 1980s Crown Vics, but those cars are almost unkillable.
Yeah.
And then every time that I got any work at all, I would basically invest that money back into driving. So I took a Skip Barber class, I took rally school, I took all these different schools basically with the goal of building up my stunt driving. Because the other thing that I had noticed, and this is now backed by studies that they've done, I was doing extra work to just get on set and get connected with people. And I would meet women that used to be stunt women who were in their 40s. And I would see all these stunt men in their 50s driving. And I was like, the way to career longevity is to build a skill that doesn't require your body to stay in the same shape. Because, like it or not, actors can be pretty picky about who's doubling them, because you are physically representing the actor. Mm-hmm. And I think that there can be some sensitivity around how old is the person that's doubling me and all of this. So it's now been documented. Stunt women have 10 years of key earning potential between the ages of, I think it's 25 and 35. And for stunt men, it's 20 years. So it's a double career length. So that's why I started anyway, training in stunt driving. And at one point, one of the stunt drivers that I knew, who was a bit of a mentor to me, he was like, you need to try this drift class. And I went down and I took a drifting class again at Willow Springs. And it was like, honestly, it was like drugs. I was like, so stunt driving is all sliding cars, right? But usually you're sliding them to a stop, or you're like sliding around a corner. But I loved that feeling of being connected with the car and managing the traction and feeling when it was sideways and controlling that. So drifting was just that, it was just my favorite part. And I think I bought a car the next week, and started practicing. I'd already bought a Crown Vic after I'd taken the Rick Siemens class, but now I bought this drift car. And I just got into it. I started basically flying to California once a month to train and spending all the money I earned working, like, falling down or being set on fire, to pay to do more driving. And then I had an opportunity during COVID. I had started competing a little bit at that point, but I always said, like, I never want to do Formula Drift. I don't want to do any of that. I just like driving. And then I ended up in a competition and not realizing, I ended up earning my license basically for Formula Drift. And I became the only Canadian woman to ever earn a license for Formula Drift. And I was like, wow, this wasn't my intention, but this feels like a door I can't not walk through, because I don't know who it's going to open for next. Right. There weren't a ton of women training in drifting. And certainly for me, it was just something that I loved. I would do the very grassroots, like throw everything in your car, drive to the track, drift with everyone that you meet, and then slowly just build my cars up over time. But I wasn't seeing a lot of women in that space, and certainly not who were maybe as like foolish as me to dedicate so much of their time to it. So I basically, at that time, I was the full-time stunt coordinator for a network TV show in Vancouver. And at the end of that season, I basically decided to step back from my role working full-time, sell my place, and prepare to compete in Formula Drift. So that next year, I did 20,000 miles around the US, drifted at 20 different tracks. I think I did over 80 track days. I just spent everything I had, I wanted to get the seat time. I felt like I'd gotten lucky to earn my license, and I didn't want to show up completely unprepared. It turns out you're never prepared, right? For a level up like that, you're never prepared. And I had competed in so many competitions and different events before Formula Drift. And still I got there to the first event and was like, oh, Okay. Yeah, so that's how I got into it, and drifting is just this thing that's now really consumed me, and I think any people who are really passionate about something, we love to share that passion with other people. So that's
So
become a big part of it
when
for
you
me.
got to that first event and you were like, whoa, what
Mhm.
was it that you saw or whatever that made you think, oh dear, what have I got myself into?
Well, so drifting traditionally, it's a newer motorsport, and a lot of the people come from a little bit more of a grassroots background. Something that I learned. So this is always just something I did on my own. Like I would go to the track, I would maybe have one crew member, but I needed to have a whole team because I had obligations. Like I had to be in a driver's meeting, I had to be at autograph signings, I had all of these other obligations. I couldn't work on my car. That would be problematic, and I had to. I was team owner, owned the car, was managing all the different pieces, and it was just a lot on top of the fact that like Formula Drift's pro spec rounds start at Road Atlanta, and Atlanta is one of the fastest tracks in the FD circuit. It's a downhill entry. It's super fast, and I got I don't even think I got 4 practice laps in that first
Mm,
round. So most drift events, and I have a lot of feelings about the circuit and how drivers could be better prepared. And it's the kind of content that I might start making because I do want to help people show up and feel as prepared as possible. But when you earn your Formula Drift license, probably the maximum speed on most tracks where you're competing is 60 miles an hour. But the entry at Atlanta is at least 100.
wow.
So there's a major advantage for the young people that maybe don't have full-time jobs and their families helping them, and they can run it over and over again on the sim. I am a part of that generation that didn't start driving on the sim, and it's really easy to go from sim to real life driving because you get more information from the car. But drivers who are used to seeking feedback from the car really struggle on sims, which is why a lot of the old school drivers, everyone has a sim, but they tend not to use it because
Hmm.
I've used really high end sims and those are incredible because you can feel the car. And as soon as
Yeah.
I have that feedback, then I can drive in it. But in any case, it's a huge adjustment. It's a lot of speed, and even the kids that were driving on sim were like, okay, well, the sim does not give you that feeling in the pit of your stomach when you're going downhill and accelerating, and the car is gaining more speed than the throttle is giving it because of gravity.
Hmm.
And you're initiating in Atlanta so far away from the inner clip, like you're throwing the car sideways, and you're on like it's still a straight, and you have to know like commit to being fast enough that the car is going to drift around that corner, but it really is psychologically a lot, you
Yeah.
know. Uh, so that on top of many other things, just the fan environment, how engaged the fans are, all of it. It's a big step up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's going from the minors to the pros,
Hmm. Yeah.
basically.
And what's kind of interesting with Formula Drift, Pro Spec is technically a feeder series, but because it runs at half of the rounds of Formula Drift with the same autograph signings, with the same media, we're kind of thrown into it in a way that is like you're really not prepared for it because I don't think that any of the Pro Am series, even if they have live streams, have the same sort of fan engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other part of that too, I think the drifting has become, like you said, so much more popular in the last
Yeah.
several years. And maybe maybe that even goes back to Tokyo Drift and
Mhm.
the I can't even think now the name of the series. I've seen them all.
Fast and Furious.
Yeah, Fast and Furious. I
Yeah.
mean, my husband and I are bikers and we just that's the kind of movies we love and so, we've watched those. We always get to the theater because you got to see it on the big screen. And
Of
then,
course.
we watch it when it's on TV. So I think that maybe brought it to the forefront some because
Yeah.
I didn't really know anything about it until then and it's just gotten more popular and you'll go to other events like I was in I want to say I was in Kentucky maybe 4 years or so back and it was for a national drag race event but they had drifting going on like in another part of the area
Hmm.
for people to, they had brought drifters in to do and show, and people were really loving that. And so I think it's just become more exposed to the fans.
Well, I think there's a number of reasons why. I mean, if you look at F1, no one watches F1 and goes, "That's possible for me."
Right.
Right? It's like you have to be born so wealthy and then have training from the time that you're a toddler, basically.
Hmm.
The amount of advantage and preparation you need to have, very few people have access to that. But the thing with drifting is the amount of fun you can have with a car that you buy on the street and do minimal modifications to. Like, you don't have to be wealthy. And when you go to grassroots events, you see that there's all different levels of budget and everyone is still having fun because the car
Hmm.
is going sideways. And it doesn't matter. Like, when you're drifting with someone, it's just as fun to chase the slow car that, sometimes more so than the car that's like 1,000 horsepower and going through tires every 2 laps. I actually
Uh-huh.
think it's more fun in a car where you don't have to change the tires all the time, and you have more to manage. Like, I work pretty extensively with a coach named Taka Ono, who's one of the first ever Formula Drift drivers. He competed for the first 10 seasons. He runs a school also at Willow Springs, but he has an AE86, which is a kind of iconic car for drifting, JDM car, but it's like maybe 100 horsepower.
Wow.
And if you don't run the perfect line, full commitment, anticipate everything that's happening in the car, you're not going to be drifting anymore. And I did a
Exactly.
day in that car, way more fun than a car that you can just stomp on it and make it go sideways anytime, because your skill has to be better. You have to be on it in such a level. So, I mean, I think that's a big part of it with drifting for the people
Yeah.
that engage in it, but also to watch it. It's only a highlight reel, right? In what other sport are you watching cars going, "Oh my God, are they going to hit? Are they going to hit? Oh, what about now? Are they going to hit?" Like, drifting is only adrenaline all the time. So
Yeah.
that arc and the emotional arc, like, I get so invested watching it for the same reason.
Yeah. It's very like exciting to watch. Like,
Yeah.
I stood and watched those gals. There were three gals that day, and then there were probably four or five, six guys.
Mhm.
And it was so fun to stand there and watch. And I wasn't there to see that,
Yeah.
but my husband and I enjoyed that probably more than the national event. It was just fun to
Yeah.
watch. Yeah.
I think it's a lot more. I mean, I'm a little bit biased, obviously,
Well, sure,
but
but that's okay.
but drag racing is shorter, and there's such, like, you can't perceive so much as a fan unless there's a big change. It's just
Right.
you feel it viscerally, but
Yeah.
it's not the same.
No, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite thing about being in the Formula Drift series?
Well, I think the community is really incredible. Formula Drift did a really good job of supporting me as a driver, and they are really doing a lot to grow this sport globally. But the fan engagement is incredible. The support from the community, and also I think the support from the other drivers. Like, it is completely normal, even at that level. We have a Discord, and someone will post in the Discord, or people will run from pit to pit, like, "We need this part. Who has this part?" And we'll give it to
Hmm.
each other, even at that
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
And that to me is just, I think the best part about any community is the humans, and the
I
shared
agree.
experiences. For me, the crew that I had, the moments that we shared, most of which were absolutely miserable at the time, but really fun to look back at.
Right.
Um, it's that, the driving is really cool, but the people are a really big part of it for me.
Yeah. So, what was your biggest challenge when first of all, being a stunt driver, I can't even imagine some of the things that you did. You said being set on fire and whatever. And and I think about Tom Cruise jumping
Mhm.
off that mountain in that, it's like, oh, brother. But I mean, it's crazy stuff. So, you went from that
Yeah.
to Formula Drift, which to me seems like much safer than being a
You know
stunt
what's
person.
it's interesting that you would say that, because it is, in some senses. Like, I definitely crashed my car quite a few times at Formula Drift, and those crashes were some of the least impactful on me comparatively. Because again, I mean, drifting kind of looks unsafe, but if you consider the cars aren't that far apart, they're
That's
not
true.
like the change in velocity isn't that different, right? Walls are solid; those hurt for sure. The car
Yeah.
is well built. I'm wearing my hybrid. I'm wearing, all the necessary safety gear, and we're not going that fast in drifting comparatively to some of the other sports. But I think the biggest thing for me is when I get hired to do a stunt driving job, I'm getting hired because I won't crash the car unless I'm supposed to, right? I can't make a mistake. I have to be driving below 100%. And if I'm not terrified when I'm competing in drifting, I'm not driving hard enough. And that was a
Okay.
big challenge for me, right? I always leave something in the tank at work because they're hiring me so that the car goes home in the same condition unless it was planned for it not to. And if I'm not taking those risks, I'm not competitive. So that
Okay.
was a big challenge for me in Formula Drift. And to be honest, the bigger challenge for me was financial.
Oh.
It professional motorsport is really expensive,
Mhm.
and I didn't have a family backing me. Sponsorship is really hard for prospect drivers. It's easy to access parts, but actual funding is a lot harder. And then again, like there's no shortage of people that want to support you, but every person that shows up has hard costs, right? You need to
Yeah.
transport those people, you need to feed those people, you need to house those people, and
Right.
then you need to manage the logistics of having all of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a big piece for me, and that's the piece where I was in a position in my second season where I was choosing between being able to practice and being able to have a crew.
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know,
I can
and
see that
I
because it's, when you're and people are dependent on being paid to help, then that is on you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I will say this, and maybe a lot of people aren't aware of this because there's this really like this idea of careers in motorsport, and
Hmm.
I remember having this like kid approach me at an event and be like, "I'd love to come help you out," and he's like, "I must make good money, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, like you need to know, very few of these drivers have budget, and even at a level above me, I had a rule that everyone got their own bed, everyone was sleeping in a place with heat and with access to a shower, you know,
Hmm.
and we were feeding everyone, and not every team does that.
No.
There were teams where the entire team is sleeping in the trailer at the track,
Hmm.
right? And it's the weather is awful.
Right.
And teams are doing whatever they can afford. Like, no judgment. It's just for me, I couldn't allow that. And I think that maybe if I had been able to, I would have been able to continue for longer.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of, yeah, even top level teams in FD are paying in snacks.
Yeah.
We
I
have beer
believe
and
it.
snacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some people that's okay. They have the financial resources that they're doing something they love. It's not about
Yeah.
the money. But honestly, most people need to be paid. I mean, they
Yeah.
have to
People also need to eat.
yeah, they just can't do it for nothing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that, I mean, you look at even a local short track, you want two or three of your buddies to come and help you. You got to pay their
Yeah.
pit passes and feed them at night. And it's a few $100s. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just at a local little short track here in Kalamazoo, Michigan,
Yeah.
And so I would say that's an issue. I don't care what kind of racing you're in. I was just listening yesterday because 24 hours of Daytona is going on, and I was listening to qualifying yesterday. And the one team they asked him, I think, how many people did they have at the race that weekend? 150. 150 people, and he said we have almost all of the Hampton. We have, I think he said, 10 motorhomes, and he was listing, and I can't even imagine what that. Now we're talking, money, and like you
Mm-hmm.
said, F1, you can't start in that normally unless you've got something. I always refer to that as the rich man's series,
Mm-hmm.
because even the people that go to watch is
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
The movie stars and the whatever. It's different. So Yeah, I can't even imagine the struggles. And it's hard enough when it's the kind of racing or a series that people are familiar with. But if you
Mhm.
go into somebody and say, "Oh, I'm a formula drifter," they probably look at you like, "What's that?"
And that depends on the demographic, right?
Yes,
That
I'm
depends on the
sure.
age. And what's interesting to me, and I feel that this is actually really important to mention, Formula Drift has the same viewership as NASCAR.
Really.
It does. And they have the youngest demographic of audience of any
Oh, I'm
motorsport,
sure.
which
Yeah,
means it's only going to get bigger.
right.
And personally, I think it's under leveraged. I think that the sponsors that could have
Mhm.
access to these young people before they're making their brand loyalty decisions, they're missing a huge opportunity
They
in my
are.
in my
You're
opinion.
right.
And the other thing is this, like most of the Formula Drift fans and most of Gen Z are cord cutters. They don't have TV.
Yeah.
So, and
Mm-mm.
nobody, like, frankly, even I don't have the attention span to watch an entire race where almost nothing happens for most of it.
Yeah.
And that's the shift in our community. That's a shift in society in terms of
True.
people have shorter attention spans. There's so much happening. So, yeah, I mean, Formula One, it's sort of this cycle, right? They have so much money, they can invest that money in media. They can invest that money in advertising,
Mhm.
and that investment has a return in your fan base.
Sure.
A younger sport doesn't have that same investment, and they really need to, I mean, it's the marketing opportunities, right? If you look at what
Yeah.
the buy-in is for NASCAR, for instance, like I was speaking with potential partners and they were like, yeah, even before we sponsor a team, if we want to be in NASCAR, it's $500,000.
Oh, yeah.
We know what kind of ROI you would get for $500,000 in Formula Drift? It
Oh,
would be
you could
insane.
be the you could be the title sponsor for a couple of years.
Yeah, so there's a real opportunity there, and I think it's really important to highlight. And also the other thing in terms of accessibility, like you have kids, there's a 14-year-old who's probably gonna be top 3 this year. Well, he'll be 15 now, but the number of children that are competing at the highest level in the world in this sport because of sim driving, and I mean, honestly, because their families have the ability to make
Yeah.
that a reality for them. But it's accessible, and that means that more kids are getting engaged with it, right?
Mhm.
They're
Yeah.
engaging with the Formula Drift community, they're engaging with the car community in general, they're wanting to build cars because they see it as something they could do,
Yeah.
which, yeah, to me, it has more of a return for sponsors anyway.
Yeah, and the key to all of that is you've got to find one sponsor that gets it, and
Mhm.
then the others are like, "Oh, I wonder why Red Bull is doing this," or
Mhm.
Red Bull is coming back to NASCAR, and it's a huge deal. Well, it would only take a Bush beer or who knows what
Mhm.
to follow the drifting series, and then the other ones would follow along, or
Yeah,
FedEx. They're not NASCAR anymore. That'd be a great series for them to get
yeah,
into, but you've got to find. My son used to always say about anything in life, you've got to find the person who cares,
yeah.
and then it moves on from there for sure. Yeah. So so let's say a kid sees drifting or watches it. He's 8 years old.
Yeah.
How would he get started? Through The Sims?
I would suggest The Sims. I mean, my friend just sent me a video this morning of a 5-year-old in China who's driving real cars, in rally, or 6-year-old, I think. It really depends on what the parents are able to do, but the cost of a sim is so much lower than anything else, and you can build so much quality seat time in a
Mm-hmm.
kid that young. The 14-year-old that I was talking about, uh, he was competing at Irwindale at the end of the season, and as a part of my women's tour, we went and met his mother, who's also a drifter. Actually, both his parents are like high level professional drifters from Japan. And we were asking, like, how many times did you drive this track on the sim? And he said 6,000.
No wonder he's good at it.
Right? Like, yes, 6,000 reps will make you good at anything. Um,
Yeah,
but you have that time as a young person, right? So
sure.
really a lot of the determining factor, I think, is how able the parent is to create the circumstances. But it is a lot more affordable to buy a sim than to pay for lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that talks to me that's an adult, I really suggest that they take classes as soon as possible instead of trying to learn anything on their own. Because a big problem that I had was I had all of these bad habits that I'm
Oh,
still trying to unlearn, right? Of like, if you can train the muscle memory correctly from the beginning, you're never
right.
having to untrain those fundamental habits.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, tell me about the women's tour that you just mentioned.
Oh, um, so my first season in Formula Drift, I got there and I it's a fairly predominantly male space, both like
Mhm.
in the driver's seat and in the pits, but I would see a few women,
Yeah.
often wives and girlfriends helping selling merch or doing other things. But throughout my years I had met a few women who were spotters, and then I through a series of circumstances, I met one woman in particular, and her name is Jen Horsey. She's a motorsport marketing person, journalist. Used to do rally driving herself. Co-drove for some pretty big names. And when I met her, she was with the team owner of the team that she manages, and I just couldn't understand. Like, I looked at her and I was like, this woman does not have the presence of a girlfriend. you know, who
Yeah.
is this person? I ended up meeting her, and then I Googled her and was like, oh my God, like, what hasn't she done? This is incredible. And why does nobody know this person exists? Well, she's too busy doing her job and being good at it for anyone to see her, right? She's not looking for accolades or promotion. And then there was Lorette Nickel, the incredible announcer for Formula Drift, and a few other women that I saw. And I was like, man, these are really inspiring women. There's also Shelby, who's now crew chief for James Dean, who just won his fourth season of Formula Drift.
Okay. Now, what is
And
Shelby's last name? Do you know?
Shelby
I think I've heard of her.
Craxton, Shelby Craxton.
I think I've heard of her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
She's incredible. Anyway, at the end of at my last round, I was feeling pretty down. Like, I had not had a good round, and my thought was also like, how can I be of service to this community? Like, help it grow, and also like see more women around me, because there are these incredible badass women. And so I approached Formula Drift with an idea, and I said, hey, can I do this women's tour? And they were like, sure, we'll give you tickets, whatever. And I just posted it on my Instagram, and it was the last round of Formula Drift for 2023, a round that I don't compete in. And I ended up with 30 women. And
Wow.
I led them around the pits. We went and stopped. All these women made time to talk to us. I would basically interview them informally and ask them about their career paths, how they got there, obstacles they faced, advice that they had. And it was just like this incredibly inspiring community building experience, and something that I always incorporated in these women's tours is kind of midday when everyone's feeling a little bit comfortable. Then we ask everyone about their own cars and their own experiences. And it's just this incredibly, like, what it made me realize was how much marketing opportunity was being missed, because every woman that attended my women's tour had at least two cars and was
Wow.
working on them herself. And no one was acknowledging, hey, these women would spend money in our space. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so those
Yeah.
women, the original women's tour attendees, are still connected a year later. They're all on a group chat together. And I had a situation the following year, the first non-Formula Drift competition I was running, where the crew guy that I had at the time wasn't able to read a calendar correctly and forgot to tell me he wasn't available. So very last minute, I was
Um,
like, oh, I need some crew. And one of the women who had attended just shot out a message and said, Z needs help. And 8 women showed up. A lot of it was their first time ever, and I was teaching them things as well. But that made me realize, like, I can create room in my pits to give women these opportunities to work on cars, because there's a lot of,
mm-hmm.
especially in drifting, there's not a ton of red seal mechanics in the space.
Yeah.
You need to be heads up. You need to be really good at reading a situation. You need to be situationally aware, and you need to be driven. We got to get all those tires changed. We got to move stuff from here to here. We got to clean up the pits. We got to sell merch. Like, there's lots of jobs to do.
I'm going to interrupt you. When you say that, that's what women are good at.
Yeah.
Organization, cleaning it up,
Yes.
getting it ready to go, seeing
Yeah.
what needs to be done without somebody
Hmm.
telling them.
And this is the thing that I always say to people, and it seems to really help them, is make sure you know what our mission is. Like if the car needs to be on track at this time, that will determine every other decision you make now. Which thing is more important to that goal? Okay, well, oh, we need radios. Okay, are the radios charged? What's the next step? And I mean, that serves you no matter what you do in life, right? That will
Right.
make you an asset anywhere you go. And that's how I built my career in film, just being a great assistant. If
Yeah.
you can anticipate somebody's needs and then the broader needs, you will become
Hmm.
essential. Yeah, so the women's tour, like it gained legs. At this point, I think I've had about 125 women through my women's tours. I did 4 rounds at Formula Drift in 2024. I also had female apprentices on my crew all season. I had a majority female crew actually for 2024, which was really cool. But the women's tour has been incredible. I've been so inspired by the people that showed up. The very last round of Irwindale this year, we had the first ever female Hot Wheels designer. There was a mother-daughter who messaged me and said, "Can we attend together?" And the mother and daughter have a project car together. It's an RX-7. And the mother learned to fix cars from her mother, who used to
Wow.
buy them at the wrecker, fix them up, sell them for money, and had the middle mother painting the cars when she was 12. It There's so many women already in this space and already passionate about cars, but the overwhelming you know how do I say this? I guess the stereotype is that women aren't into cars, or like they're
That's
just
not
getting into
true.
cars, or they're into it for attention, but they always have been into cars. I met a woman at a women's luncheon back in December, and her husband bought her like a Aston Martin Vantage, yeah, for her birthday. So we're not coming from the same situation at
No.
whatsoever. But she's like, I've always loved cars, and I just don't know anyone who likes them the way that I do. But like, regardless of your background, regardless of your upbringing, regardless of how much money you have, there's a lot of women that love cars. And
Hmm.
I mean, I really think that all companies that are involved in that space would really do well to acknowledge that those women exist.
Well, and they don't market to the women.
Well, that's just it. And they don't market to the women in spite of the fact that not only do the women have their own interests, they also make the majority of the buying decisions for households,
I was just
right?
going to tell you
We
that.
know this.
I did some research on that a couple years
Yeah.
ago. And, and I love statistics.
Mhm.
I never took it in school and didn't know it was a thing back way when I was young. But so many, like 85% of the decisions made in the household are made by the woman,
Yeah.
including what car to buy, what color, all those things.
Hmm. Yeah.
She buys Green Giant over the store label. It was so interesting. Even
Yeah.
financially, women tend to make the decisions,
Yeah.
financial decisions in the household.
And and even on men's products, because women are
Yes.
buying, they're spending more money than men, they're making more purchases than men. So yeah, advertisers would do well to not like to advertise to women specifically, but also acknowledge that these women could be the end users of your product.
Mm-hmm.
The bar is so low when it comes to marketing to women, especially in a
Yeah,
space that's traditionally masculine, that most
it
women
is.
will be loyal to any company that does anything at all
Well,
to
and that's
acknowledge
the
that.
other thing. In typically, women are more loyal to their brands.
Yeah.
You find a kind of body wash you love, or a shampoo, or whatever it might be. Unless something terrible goes wrong, you're going to use it the rest of your
Yeah.
life.
Yep.
And we're so loyal. Or I look at my favorite driver, who sponsors him. Okay, I'm going to go to FedEx instead of UPS.
Yeah.
It's so true, but I don't think they really get it. They don't get it. The marketing people.
Hmm. I feel that's shifting as there are more women in that
It
space.
is. It is.
And the numbers really don't lie. So any
Yeah.
company that's really trying to make money, if they look at the research, we'll make those
Yeah.
decisions, but it is a slow shift.
It's a slow shift for sure. And unfortunately too, a lot of the brands that are on race cars or are more geared, I guess, towards men,
Hmm.
as far as that goes. And so, unless it's, Sunny Delight or, I mean, things that
Yeah.
everybody uses, if it's bearings or gears or whatever, it's more going to be of interest to the man. It's just how it is. But yeah, I'd love to see some big advertisers, like even like Revlon or somebody who's really in a woman's space,
Hmm.
say, hey, I see the value, and I just think they would be amazed at how well it would go if they would just give it a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, what's your plan for 2025? Do you
It's a
have
great
one? I mean, it's
question.
hard.
I
It's
do
hard.
I do have a plan for 2025. It's sort of slowly coming together. A lot of At the end of 2024, I was just slaughtered, to be honest. I sold my home to fund Formula Drift, and I fully spent all of the money I ever had. I'm privileged in the fact that when I work in film, I can earn good money, but then I
Mhm.
was turning down work to be able to compete. So I told myself I was going to run a lighter season this year, but just putting together my calendar of events, it's not looking actually much lighter. It'll just be slightly more condensed. So I'll compete in Hot Pit Autofest, which is a California based series, Southern California. I will do some grid life events because every time I attend grid life, I remember why I love driving.
Mhm.
It's such a celebration of automotive culture. I get to drive on iconic tracks with like
Yeah.
no stakes. I get to give people ride-alongs and like
Yeah.
just love it again because honestly, running Formula Drift was so hard and it was such like the stakes felt so high to me financially and otherwise that I I couldn't really remember why I loved it, you know?
Yeah.
I knew that I had chosen it, but it wasn't the
But
things that
the
were filling me
expenses,
were yeah.
yeah, and those were started to outweigh the fun you were having. And
Yeah, I mean it
when that starts to happen, you have to make some changes. You got to pivot.
yeah, I think I learned a lot. I mean, really, do I wish that circumstances had been different and I'd been able to like have more resources to dedicate to training and running my program? Like, absolutely. But I don't really have any regrets for doing it. I'm so thrilled at the women that I met that were able to come on my team. The women's tour really showed me like a part of my purpose that I didn't know about yet, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
that came about. I think if I'd been winning, if I showed up and just won right away the way that I wanted to and everything just went well, I wouldn't have had the resources to dedicate to, and I wouldn't have had to think of like how else can I be of value in this space. I
Right.
want to be here so badly. How else can I contribute? But the first women's tour just made me realize how much it was needed. The feedback that I got was so incredible, and um, it was really life changing for people. And
Mhm.
just to find community in that way. And that's something I'm really passionate about. So something actually that I will be doing more of this year. I wanted to do this last year, but it didn't really fall into place is I think there's a big gap. What I noticed on the women's tour is we created this safe space for women to learn without stakes or consequences if they asked a stupid question because
Mhm.
there were only women there. So on the first women's tour, the only man that spoke was engineer and marketing director for the wheel company that I use, Kansei Wheels. And he was just talking about how wheels are made and giving a little bit of information. And all the women were asking like really smart, like detailed questions. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, these people want to they want to learn this stuff. So I
Yeah.
approached Chris and I said, hey, can we do an event for women at the factory? Like, can we do a tour and you talk more about it? And he was like, yeah, okay. We did this crepes and Kansei thing where we did wheel curling that I invented. We had a little social and then we did a tour and it was incredible. And that made me realize I could teach people about all kinds of things. We could create these opportunities that,
Mhm.
like, rather than it being like you have to sign up for a class and sit under fluorescent lights at a community college, like, let's make it a soiree, like, let's have cocktails or
Yeah.
mocktails, and let's learn about cars, and, like, no stupid questions. But so I would like to do these kind of automotive soirees that are educational in nature, because the other thing that I'm realizing is it's a survival skill, right? The number of
Oh, for
women that are like,
sure.
I can't even change a tire. Or I was in
Yeah.
Los Angeles when the fire started, and one of my friends, her car wouldn't start, and she barely had like satellite text reception. And I was trying to text her through how to jumpstart her car because she had no idea.
Mhm.
That there's a point at which it kind of doesn't matter what your demographic is.
Yeah.
In an emergency, there's certain things you need to be able to do, and people
Mhm.
aren't being taught that, and we're not
Yeah.
creating a space where people can learn that without feeling dumb, or
Well,
or
or
being worried
feeling
about
out of
being
place.
random.
A
Yeah,
woman is going to feel out of place
yeah,
if she signs up for a class and she goes and it's 90%
mhm,
men.
yeah,
And she's just not. But what you're doing, first of all, it's fun. It's fun to
yeah,
be with all those other women. And you all have something in common before you ever meet each other.
yeah,
And then after you do meet each other and then you've done an event, you've built a relationship. And now the next time you do one, you're going to have more people because they're all going to tell their friends, oh, you need to go to this. This is really fun. This is cool.
yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to put a bug in your, that's almost something that I can see you monetizing as far as, um, there's a need and you're filling it.
So what's been really consistently important for me, and this is the same. People said like, "Oh, how much do you charge for your women's tour?" I'll never charge for the women's tour because I feel that there's already too many barriers to entry. I don't ever want there to be a financial one. I'm not trying to profit off of these women, but these events that I'm hosting provide a unique access to a demographic that will be loyal, that is going to spend money with your company.
Right.
So I'm absolutely open to companies supporting it. If I'm
Sure.
going to teach an oil change, I will teach how to change your company's oil. Uh,
Exactly.
we
That's
we
what
can
I was
use certain
thinking.
products, like companies that believe in this. They are
Uh-huh.
making a statement that is so supportive and so positive, and it is going to have a ripple effect. It's an incredible marketing opportunity that you can't
Yeah.
get anywhere else.
Yeah.
So hopefully, as I talk to more companies, there are some companies that are really seeing the value in it. What's really interesting about the wheel event that I did is one of the women that attended it actually just reached out to me and said that was one of the most incredible events I've ever done, and I want to arrange it for another women's group that I'm working with. Well, all of those women buy wheels for their cars,
Yes,
right?
they
Like, it just,
do.
the ripple effect is huge. And as soon as you start supporting these communities, you don't know where it's going to go, but it isn't going
Yeah.
to stop.
That's what I was thinking about. Not so much you charging the women. I was
Yeah.
thinking more right along those lines, like what kind of oil are you using? The wheel manufacturer, the
Mhm.
piston, the spark plug, the whatever.
Yeah.
Those are the people that need to get behind it because, like you said, if you're using Pennzoil, they're going to buy Pennzoil because that's what the class was on, or
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
there's an element of brand recognition, right? Especially when you're new
Hmm.
to a space. I know for me, I'll tend to, if it's like something that I'm not familiar with or I haven't done a ton of research, I just buy the name I recognize,
Right,
right? A
right.
lot of people are guilty of that.
Hmm.
So creating that brand familiarity and the positive association is really important.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I 100% agree. I love the whole women's thing you're doing. I just think that's amazing, and I can see that that's really going to grow.
I hope so.
For you. I hope so too. So, how would we keep track and see where you're at, what you're doing, social media? Tell me where to find you.
So on Instagram, I'm Z Drives, ZEE Drives with an S. On YouTube, Z Drives with a Z at the end. And zdrives.com is my website. I'm doing my best to keep that a little bit more updated with where I'll be this year and some of my events. But my primary social media right now is Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Sounds good. What did I not ask you about, or we haven't talked about that we should have mentioned that we just got onto another
Oh,
tangent, completely overlooked?
I mean, we chatted about so many things, but
Yeah.
I think I just want to say if you're even curious, just do it. Just
Yeah.
try. Approach those people. Generally speaking, the car community is so welcoming, regardless of what part of it you're in. If you show up with an earnest interest in something, people will help you.
They
Drifting,
will.
especially, just show up to the track, ask the questions. We love giving ride-alongs. If we see someone struggling, we want to help them succeed.
Yeah.
So be out
That's
there. And
good.
this is what I said to the women at the women's tour. If two or more of you go to an event together, it's a women's event.
You're right.
So bring your
I love
friends,
that.
show up, like be a part of that space, and show people how much presence we already have.
So Lynn St. James, I'm sure you know who that is. She,
Mm-hmm.
I've gone to the Women with Drive event. They've had 4 of them. I've gone to 3.
Mm-hmm.
They just announced that next year it's going to be back at Indy, and I'm going to get my hotel here as soon as I can because it's the perfect place for that event right before PRI and all that. But anyway,
Yeah.
Lynn St. James she said something one time that I'll never forget. She said, "Men show up, women have to be invited. So don't wait to be invited.
Yeah.
You need to show up."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
Oh,
that.
Z, this has been so fun to talk to you. I know a little bit about drift. I interviewed a gal from California. I'd have to look up her name, Melissa
Mhm.
somebody.
Oh
I
yeah, Melissa Drifts. Yeah, I've met her.
I met her at PRI. I sat down. I was eating lunch, and she and her husband asked if they could sit at the table with me, and we got to talking. And she was telling me what she did, and then I interviewed her, and a lot of fun. And so, um, yeah, just enjoyed so much learning so much more
Mhm.
about what goes into this than I already knew, and I'm going to learn more about it, and I'm going to Google where these competitions are because
Well, you're in Michigan.
yeah,
Go to Grid Life.
yes, I
There's a
talked to
Grid
them
Life
at
at
PRI.
Gingerman,
There is.
and you need to go because they'll get you in a car.
Oh
You need to
God.
go for a drift ride along. Yeah, you got to
So
go. They do this
they
thing at Grid Life. I'm so sorry to cut you off. This is
no, go
incredible.
ahead.
And like everyone needs, they do a thing called these drift taxi sessions where they have race cars full of passengers, drift cars full of passengers, and they put the race cars and the drift cars on the track at the same time. And it is the most incredible, like organized mayhem that you've ever seen. That it's not any drifter and not any
Oh
racer
yeah.
can take people, but you're drifting and there's a race car here, like just fall like right up in a place that you're not used to seeing somebody, or vice versa, and just like the incredible experience for people to get to experience like no other drift track is letting people get into a car for ride-alongs that fast. Like Grid
Hmm.
Life has the fastest ride-alongs in North America.
So I did do a ride along. So Kalamazoo Speedway is my local track, and they did like a media day, and they had some drift cars. There was maybe 4 of them. And so I did get to ride, but that's a small short track, and
Yeah.
we went through the infield. So we weren't going as fast as I went when I went on the Richard Petty driving experience, which was
Mm-hmm.
really cool. But yeah, I'm definitely I talked to some people at Grid Life when I was at PRI, and I have some information from them. So yeah, I'll reach out to them because that's not that far for me to go. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
Anything else that you want to share, Z, before we hang up here?
I don't think so. I think I'm
You're
in a good
good.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a good place. It's Saturday and the sun is out in Michigan, which is, we've had a horrendous week of cold
Mhm.
and snow and blowing, and it looks beautiful, but my husband said it is kind of cold out. So, but the sunshine just makes you feel so much better.
It really
And
does.
yeah, but you're in California, so although you guys have had some real trying times in the last few
Yeah.
weeks. So, yeah.
I'm in California, but for 20 plus years, I lived in Vancouver, which is basically
Well, there you
Seattle, and
go.
it rains yeah, it's worse than snow. It's just gray for
I know, and it's gray here a lot, but when we have nice weather, we have beautiful weather. So no complaints. Well, Z, you have a good weekend, and I am going to stay in touch. I want you to stay in touch with me.
I would love that.
And I'm going to check Grid Life out and get that on my calendar for sure so that I can experience that, because I know my husband would love it too. So
Yeah,
that's a good thing to do. And I appreciate your time so much.
Likewise.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
That's it for this episode of the Women's Motorsports Network podcast. We hope you've been inspired by the stories I shared today and feel more connected to the amazing community of women in motorsports. Remember, whether you're behind the wheel, in the pits, or cheering from the stands, your story matters. And together, we're driving change and celebrating every milestone. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who loves motorsports as much as you do. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more incredible stories. So until next time, stay inspired, stay connected, and keep racing through life. This is the Women's Motorsports Network podcast, where every woman's story is worth celebrating.